Okay, so today's lesson is about solving quadratic equations, and this is obviously Year 10, 5.1, 5.2 course. Okay, the learning intention is to find the two possible values of x for a given quadratic equation. In 5.1, 5.2, there will be possible values of x. In 5.3, there's not always 2. There could be up to 2. So these are success criteria. We want to know what a quadratic equation is. We want to also know how to find the two possible values for x. We want to be able to correctly solve these problems, and we're able to use the quadratic formulas to help us solve these problems. Okay. So, what is a quadratic? Okay, a quadratic is something in the form of what we say, something maybe like ax squared plus bx plus c. That is a quadratic, and that could equal 0. Okay, you have seen things like this, so some examples have been x squared plus x plus 4, you've seen that, or you can see it like this, x plus 2, x plus 1. Or any number, you can have 2 plus x, x plus 3, yeah? Or you might have something like this, x squared equals 4. These are all quadratics, yeah? If you would expand this stuff out, the highest value for x would be x squared. So it would be x squared plus x plus 2x plus 2, which would be x squared plus 3x plus 2. Yeah, so the highest power is 2. And the same would happen for this. So what we're looking for, what makes a quadratic, is when the highest power of x is 2. When you see an x squared and not more than that. Alright? Because it's a square, we could have two possible solutions. Okay? We can have, sometimes there's just going to be one possible solution. There might be none. Yeah, in the 5.1 and the 5.2 course, we rarely investigate this. Yeah. Another example of a quadratic is if you get something like this, x plus 3 all squared, because that is x plus 3 times x plus 3. Yeah. So where we have two possible solutions will be things like when you get an x plus a number, let's say it's a, and times x plus another number, b. So in this case, there will be minus a and minus b solutions. Where you get one possible solution is when you get something like this. You get x plus 2 all squared. That will give you one possible solution that occurs twice. Okay? We're talking about perfect squares. If I was to give you this and said, what is the value of x? So what number squared gives you 4? You will automatically know off the top of your head say 2. Because 2 times 2 equals 4. But many of you will forget that also there's another solution called negative 2. Because two negatives make a positive. So if you get negative 2 times negative 2, that will also give you 4. So in this case, this perfect square, x is plus or minus 2. That is the solution. Yeah? Because there's two solutions. Alright? If I gave you another one, x squared equals 9, you would say x is equal, the square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. as 3 times 3 equals 9, but also minus 3 or negative 3 times negative 3 equals 9. If I gave you this, you would say x, I'll do it here, x is equal to plus or minus 4. If I gave you something like this, alright, you know that the opposite of squaring something is doing the square root of that number. Yeah, so if you write that in your exam, that's fine, but you must have plus or minus in front of it, because if you can see that the square root of 156 is 12.49996, or the negative version of that would also make it. Yeah, so there's always two solutions for perfect squares. Okay. If I give you something like this, okay, what it's saying is a number, which is x plus 3, multiplied by another number, which is at the moment x minus 7, has to equal 0. So we know in order for this to be true, one of these numbers has to be 0, because 1 times 0 is 0, 0 times 3 is 0, 7.5 times 4 times 0 is still 0. Anything times by 0 equals 0. Yeah. So x plus 3, x times x minus 7 equals 0. It means that this has to be 0. Yeah, because 0 times whatever this is, who cares, has to equal 0. Or this is equal to 0. Yeah, x minus 7, that has to be 0, so 0 times whatever this is will have to equal 0. So in order to solve that, we make two separate equations, linear equations, and we solve for x. So here it's x plus 3. We minus 3 from both sides. We get x equals negative 3. And if I plug in negative 3, negative 3 plus 3, that's 0. 0 times negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10, so 0 times negative 10 is still 0. That is true, so that's the solution. Alternatively, I can do here, where I plus 7 to both sides. So x has to be 7, which is also true. Because I could go 7 plus 3, well, that's 10. 7 take away 7, that's 0. 10 times 0 is 0. So x is negative 3 or 7. Either solution will give me this. Okay, so when we're solving quadratics, we're going to get possible up to 2 solutions. Okay, what might happen is that they will give you something like x squared, let's go minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. And before I can find out what x is, I have to get it into this form. So I need to try to get this into this form. So I look at the value of 6 and find the factors. So the factors of 6 are 2 and 3, or sorry, 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it. But I need to get to negative 5. I need to have these factors add up to negative 5. So I could do positive 6, so I could do minus 6 plus 1. Yeah, that could work. So minus 6 plus 1 is negative 5, but positive 1 times negative 6 is actually negative 6. So if I do a table, if I plus them or I times them, okay, so if I plus them, that's going to be negative 5, but if I times them, it's going to give me negative 6. That looks right, that looks wrong, so I can't use that. Let's try -2 and -3. If I times them together, -2 times -3, that gives me a 6. If I add them, -2 plus -3 is -5. So my factors are those. So what I do is I put my brackets, x and x goes in the front because x times x would give me x squared. And now I write -2 minus 3. And here I can solve. If this was 0, or if this was 0, x is worth 2 or 3. Okay? Now sometimes factorizing is hard for us. And we can look at this and we go through our factors, and for some apparent reason we just can't see, or we can't perfectly factorize, and that's okay. There is a little formula that we could use to remember and to find these factors. So what I suggest is that this might be on your cheat sheet. And the formula is x is worth -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And you go, there's all these letters, how do I solve this out? So, when we give you a quadratic, if you put it in order from x squared, then x, then a number, okay, so I go, let's put 3x squared plus 5x plus 10. All right, I can't factorize that, and we set that to 0. What we know is that the general kind of order of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, and that's going to equal 0. So that means that the number in front of x squared is your a. The number in front of your x is your b. And the number without an x is your c. So we're going to plug that into our formula. So we've got x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So minus b, our b is 5, so that's going to be minus 5, plus or minus 5 squared minus 4 lots of a is 3 and c is 10. And that's all over 2 lots of a, which is 3. So what I do is I plug that into my formula. So hopefully you can see that, okay, here. All right. So because I know it from the top of my head, I'll do it. I'll press the fraction bar. My b is 5, so I go -5 plus the square root of 5 squared, and I put 5 in a little bracket, minus 4 lots of the a, which is 3, minus the c, which is 10. And I see I just put it into brackets because that just means times. And I put it all over 2 lots of a. All right. If I press equal, I get a number. Oh, I don't get this number because this part is higher. Let's change that 10 to a 1. Okay, so I'm going to change that 10 to a 1. So remember when I said there was no possible solutions? That's an example of that happening. Okay, so if you get math error, that means there's no possible solutions. But here I get an answer. I get negative, let's say the 2 decimal points, negative 0.23. I'll write that down. All right, now let's go back and change this plus into a minus, because we said it is plus or minus the square root. So if we go to the minus, we change that, it goes subtraction, we get negative 1.43. Okay, and that's the solution for this problem. Okay, we'll do another example later on. Okay, so here are some examples. These are examples that you'll be doing yourself in class. Okay, so this is from our textbooks, exercise 1102. You're going to do question 1, all of question 1 apart from the ones I've done. So I've got x multiplied by x minus 7 should equal 0. Yeah. So if that's the case, then x has to equal 0, or x minus 7 equals 0. So x equals 0, or add 7 to both sides, we get 7. So therefore, x is 0 or 7. And you can write down or 7. Yeah? So when x is by itself, it already equals 0. So 0 times something is still 0. 5b. Question 1b. All right, so that means this is 5a has to equal 0, or a plus 4 equals 0. Divide both sides by 5, and I get 0 divided by 5 is 0. Here, a number plus 4 equals 0, so that number has to be negative 4. Therefore, a is worth 0 or negative 4. Okay. Question 1Q, I jump right at the end of the question. I get some harder problems. So we've got a number times another number has to equal 0. So this means that this equals 0 or this equals 0. Okay, now just solve. So I'm going to minus 9 from both sides. And I get 2y equals negative 9. And I'm going to divide by 2. So y equals negative 9 over 2. Now, if you leave it at that, that's correct. To check the back of the book, I'm sure they want it as a decimal. So negative 9 over 2, or mixed number, is the same as negative 4.5 or negative 4.5. Okay? Working with this side, we've got minus 8 from both sides. So we get 7y equals negative 8. Divide by 7. We get negative 8 over 7. If you leave it as these answers, that's fine. So y equals negative 9 over 2 or negative 8 over 7. Okay. Same thing here. Okay, we've got 10x plus 3 equals 0. Or we get 3x minus 10 equals 0. Okay, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. That gives me 10x equals negative 3. Then divide by 10, equals negative 3 over 10. Over here, I'm going to add 10 to both sides. Then divide by 3. So I get 10 over 3, which is, if you did that, which is 3 1/3. So x is negative 3 over 10, or 3 1/3. Okay, 2 solutions. Question 2 asks you to factorize first. So we want to find a number or letter that goes into both terms. In this case, m squared plus 3m, I can take an m outside. So m times m will give me m squared, and m times 3 will give me 3m. That equals 0. So if I can get this to this step, I can now go, well, m equals 0, and m plus 3 equals 0. So that's still 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. So m is equal to 0 or negative 3. Okay. Here we go with 2b. So we've got x squared and a 7x. I notice that the highest common factor between x squared and negative 7x is x. X times x gives me x squared, and x times negative 7 gives me 7x. And that is equal to 0. So this is 0, and x minus 7 is 0. So x has to be 7. Therefore, x is 0 or 7. That's the solution. These ones are very hard. Okay, we've got to jump into the back of it. So the first thing I do is I look at the 54 and I figure out factors of 54. So 54 is divided by 9. So 9 and 6 multiplied together give me 54. And 9 plus 6 will give me 15, but I want a negative 15. Well, two negatives multiplied together make a positive, and I can check that. So if I plus and times them, so I add them together, I get negative 15. And if I times them, I get 54. That's what I want. I want that and that. So all I do, because it's z squared, so I do two little brackets, put the z at the front, because z times z makes z squared, and then I put minus 9 and minus 6 into the brackets. It doesn't matter if minus 6 goes here and minus 9 goes there, it doesn't matter, because this makes this to be 0 and that to be 0. So z is worth 9, add 6 to both sides, z is worth 6, so therefore z is worth 6 or 9. Try to have the numbers in ascending order. I haven't done it for other ones, but just try. It's not the end of the world though. Okay, so here I'm looking at 170. So if I want plus and times, so two numbers I've got. Let's try. So 170, let's try 17 and 10. Okay, because 17 times 10 will make it 170. Let's try plus 17 minus 10. Well, plus 17 minus 10 will give me 7. But plus 17 minus 10 will be minus 170. But I want a negative. So let's try and do negative 17 plus 10. Multiplied again together still gives me a negative value, but when I add it, it gives me negative 7. So this is the solution I want. So I write x and x times x makes x squared. And I go negative 17 in one of them, I go plus 10 in the other. Okay, I now set them both into zeros. So x is 17 and x is minus 10, and that's my answer. Minus 10 or 17. Okay. Alrighty. Flying through it. Some examples that we also can see is when you have a squared and then you have a value that's not 0. So the first thing to do is we want to square root this, because if we square root both sides, it leaves me with just the stuff that's outside the bracket. And notice I had plus or minus square root 3. If I then add 2 to both sides, I'll go 2 plus or minus square root 3. And if I wanted to, I can plug that into my calculator. 2 plus square root 3, which is 3.73, or 2 minus square root 3, which is 0.27. Okay. Depends what the question is asking us to do. Like if we want this answer or we want it in decimals. Okay. So the first thing to do is to square root the right hand side, which is plus or minus, and then bring in that constant over. Alright, so minus 1 plus square root 2, 0.41, or minus 2.41. Alright, first thing to do, plus or minus the square root of 4.5. Bring over the 3 by minusing 3 to both sides. So minus 3 plus square root 4.5, 0.88, and subtract it is minus 5.12. Last one here, so x minus a third equals plus or minus the square root of 5 over 9. Add a third to both sides. Okay, so a third plus the square root of 5 over 9, 1.08. Subtract it, minus 0.41. Yeah, see how I'm getting two solutions for everything. Alright, an example of using the quadratic formula. Remember, the quadratic formula is x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So using my colours, this is my a. See how I just wrote 1? Because there's not a real number in front of it. If there's not a real number, we just imagine it's a 1. My b is my 5. And my c is my 6. Alright, so I'm going to plug it into the formula. And I'll do it in blue. Okay, so x equals, I've just got the formula here. So minus b. So our b is 5. So it's going to be minus 5 plus or minus 5 squared minus 4 lots of a is 1 and c is 6. Okay, and that's all over 2 lots of a, which is 1. Okay, so there's my b's, yeah, there's my a, and there's my c. Alright, if I plug that into my formula, so minus 5 plus square root 5 squared minus 4 brackets 1 close brackets bracket 6. Okay, jump down to 2 lots of 1. I get minus 2. Go back into my equation. Yeah, keep moving it. Change that plus to a subtraction, and we get negative 3. So that factorize is x plus 2, x minus 3 equals 0, which means that x equals minus 2, which we already know. Or x equals minus 3, which we already know. Okay, so if we can't factorize it and do it this way, we can use a quadratic formula to find the solutions. So x equals minus 2 or minus 3. Okay, we'll use some more of the quadratic formula. Okay, so once again, there's my a of 1, there's my c. Alright, I'm going to do both examples at the same time. Just highlight my a's and my b's. Okay, so x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, so my b is 3. I want a negative version of that. So 3 squared. My a is 1 and my c is 1 over 2 over 1. Use a calculator. Minus 3 plus square root 3 squared minus 4 lots of 1 and 1, yep, over 2, 1, I get negative 0.38 or negative 2.62. Okay, so x equals, our b is 2 and we want negative. So if we had a negative 2, this would then become a positive 2. Yeah, so if we have positive here, it becomes negative. If it was negative here, it becomes positive. Plus or minus. Whenever you have a negative or positive, if you square it, so if I had negative 2, I'll put it like that. Yeah, because it's positive, it just stays positive, right? But when you square a negative, it still becomes positive. Minus, why don't we do that? Why don't I do an example where this is negative? Okay, so I'm going to change that. So positive 2, negative 2 squared minus 4 lots of A and C. Notice the C is negative 1, so you must put that negative 1 there. All the other C's were positive, so we had a plus. But when it's negative, we have to carry the negative. Yeah. The reason why is that this ends up becoming a positive, so this is bigger than that, so it will raise the powers. So we can actually find a square root. Okay, over 2 lots of A, which is 5. Okay, let's plug that into our calculators. So, we got 2 plus negative 2. See how I did it into the bracket? Squared. Minus 4 lots of 5 minus negative 1. Notice how I did negative 1 over 2 lots of 5. Okay, we're going to get x is worth 0.69 or, take subtraction, negative 0.29. Okay, and that's going to conclude our lesson. So there's a lot there to learn. You probably have to watch this video a couple of times. So you need to know that obviously a quadratic is anything that we have x to the power of 2. Yeah. That we have 2, when we have that, we have 2 possible solutions up to 2. We want to correctly solve the problems and find the solutions. And then if we're stuck, use the quadratic formula, which x minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, thank you so much. Have a great night. Bye.